Hello everyone, I'm Professor Ozan Örmeci from Istanbul Kent University. Today we have a distinguished guest from United States, professor, a full professor of political science, Professor Mark Meirowitz. He's teaching at State University of New York, Maritime College in New York. He's also a lawyer, and Professor Meirowitz received his PhD degree from Political Science Department at Fordham University in New York. Mark, thank you for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. So, Mark, our time is limited, so I want to start with a question about your thoughts on the election results. The whole world, including Turkey, with a great attention, followed the news coming from the United States on the election night and in the coming days. So people expected a maybe a more competitive race, but in the end, President Trump and Republican Party got a majority both in the Congress and in terms of electoral college system. What are your thoughts about the reasons why President and his party became so successful?
Well, to me, it was pretty much inevitable, the Trump victory in the Electoral College and the popular vote. The problem, many problems. First of all, we did have a candidate who was Biden. He was pushed out by the Democratic Party. Harris was installed. Biden won primary elections in many states. People voted for his nomination. Nobody voted for Harris's nomination. She appeared on the scene almost like magic. And there she was, the candidate, leading big rallies and leading with, to be very candid, just empty catchwords, empty slogans, good work. Work is good work. Work is joyful work. What went before will come again. When we fight, we win. I mean, this is the president of the United States. I mean, really, the world crises are being decided by this person who is unable also to have interviews with the press to speak about what this person thinks. What do you think? Well, then she went on The View, which is an interview program, and they asked her what was, in your opinion, something different that you did that Biden did, and she can't think of anything. Now, let's just go, and that's Harris. Harris is a tremendously weak candidate, a candidate without substance, in my opinion, an empty suit, nothing there. There's nothing there. And so, to be very candid about it, I'm not partial. But anyway, but as far as Trump is concerned, Trump is an American phenomenon, but it's not so surprising. I think that what the Democrats misunderstood and continue to misunderstand, and they still can't get it. Why do people vote for Trump? They're still talking on all of the news programs. How's it possible? It's impossible that people would vote for this, but of course, and then they try to digest it by saying, well, it's the people who are not college educated. They're blue collar people. They're not sophisticated people, which is exactly what Hillary Clinton called the opposition in 2016 election, the deplorables. Well, so now then you have coming along with Biden and actually trying to sabotage Harris's campaign because he's still aggravated that he was kicked out. He calls Trump supporters garbage, and then Trump comes up with a garbage truck. You know all of that. Brilliant political moves, but from Trump. And in terms of demeaning the opponents of the Democratic Party as being either uneducated, unsophisticated, they don't know what they're doing, they don't understand anything. So right away, you say to yourself, wait a minute. I mean, I know people who are very educated, college educated, and intelligent people who are voting for Trump. How is it possible? And the answer is that it's, of course, the failings of the Biden administration on the issues of migration, on the issues of the fact that the world is in turmoil all over the world, and all of the failings of Democrats. But what Trump brings, and I think we see a little bit of it already, a little taste of Trump's effectiveness, is and we could talk about the tariffs if you want, it's not the implementation of the tariffs, it's the saying the threat of the tariffs. Right away, Mexico is going to stop migration. Can Trudeau, that great statesman from the North, Canada, he comes right away running to Trump. You see, all you have to do is, this is American politics. I don't excuse any other politics. You see around the world, by the way, Ozan Bey, turmoil around the world, in France, in Georgia, of course, the war in Ukraine, in the Middle East, you name it. Here we have Trump. Now, maybe this is indicative of the way the world is today. The world is in turmoil and needs a shakeup. So what Trump is coming in, he's shaking things up. He's shaking up. He wants to send Mr. Musk and Mr. Ramaswamy to come and fix the government. He wants to make migration end. He wants to end all the wars. These are, now whether he can do it is not the key. The key is, if you're running for president, you have to have a platform, a policy, an approach that people can understand. And people were listening to Harris. And I personally, I'm sad and sorry that she was such a weak candidate, because in our democracy, it's very important to have a vibrant debate on the issues. And we didn't. What was the debate on the issues in the campaign? Trump is a bad person. Trump is a fascist. Trump. And from Waltz, that's another story. And let's not spend any time on Waltz, a waste of time. It isn't worth our time to even talk about this deficient individual who was a poor leader and was clearly, he's a coach, he's a teacher. Watch that convention. I mean, it was great television, but America and the world, we're facing issues. We need people who can tell us what they're going to do. And, Trump, for better or for worse, he said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Now, maybe you disagree, and people are entitled to disagree, but at least he articulated what he planned to do. And we do see he's trying to do it. Of course, as you mentioned with the nominations, he's hitting a few snags and difficulties, and we can touch on that. So I think to boil it down, Trump's approach is very people-oriented, and people resonate with a candidate. Look, in American politics, you have a John F. Kennedy, who's a very charismatic, and people, people react to that. People react to the candidates. They react to a Barack Obama. They react to that charisma. And, people might say, well, why don't they focus on the policies? Look, people are human. And we don't go to the ballot box and we don't say when people come out, well, why did you vote? Why did you vote? But it's very, very simple. Kennedy, the statistics show that women voted for Kennedy, not all of them, because he was a very handsome, charismatic guy. Does that mean that vote is less worthy than a vote of somebody who read all the position papers and read every document that Kennedy's campaign put out? No. Democracy says the people, yes, the people decide. So the people resonated with Trump. And Trump's campaign was very effective. I think, the thing what he did with McDonald's when Kamala Harris said, I worked at McDonald's, and he went and he served French fries at McDonald's. I mean, he's a brilliant marketer. He's also very good at connecting with people. And you could see it at the rallies. You could see that people want to connect with his message, whatever it is. And frankly, the Democrats had an empty package when they were saying he's terrible, he's this, he's that. And so if that's their campaign, it was doomed to fail. And so I think at the end of the day, that's some of it. There's probably more of it. But I think that's a combination of a weak Democratic campaign and a very, very brilliant campaign on the part of Trump. I mean, there's no question about it.
Thank you, Mark. I got the message. So I fully agree with you. I think Trump's rallies, I've been watching from Turkey. People come also for entertainment. The president-elect has a special charisma. Plus, not all Americans are political science full professors like you. So maybe to appeal to average American, is more important, maybe with some also rhetorics which are not politically correct. I think Trump's campaign was very good overall. And Mark, maybe you could also tell us your opinions about President-elect Trump's earlier nominations for Secretary of State, Florida Senator Mr. Marco Rubio. We know him from U.S. Congress, but of course, foreign policy is a new job for him because senators deal with foreign policy issues as well, but it's mostly domestic politics. So now he will direct the American Foreign Service, which is a huge responsibility. And other nominations, of course, some of them drew criticism also from American media. So Trump's earlier nominations, could you maybe share with us your views on President-elect's choices?
Well, some of the nominations are just perfect, 100%. Here's the use, perfect. And I think in that category, certainly Rubio for the Secretary of State and Mike Huckabee for Ambassador to Israel, and also Elise Stefanik for the United Nations. Look, we know President Erdogan has been very critical of the United Nations. We certainly in America, the United Nations it's controversial in the sense that people don't care what goes on there. They don't think it has any value, that it's a waste of time. If the purpose of the United Nations is to have conversations, that's probably okay. Not a bad idea to bring together people at the UN facility to talk, converse, do things that might lead to peace. But functionally, what the UN does is not efficacious, and it needs to get a shakeup. The world is bigger than five. That's President Erdogan's idea. I certainly am not 100% sure that's going to work, because the idea that the United Nations was set up with was that the great powers after World War II joined the UN with the understanding that they could not be affected by the UN in terms of peacekeeping, so they gave the veto to the great powers. Now, it's a longer discussion maybe for another day, but the fact that the UN needs a shakeup and Elise Stefanik is going to shake it up. This is the same idea as Daniel Patrick Moynihan when he was ambassador. The UN fixation on the Middle East has got to stop. They become ineffective. First of all, they don't do anything constructive. And we know in the past that UN peacekeeping forces, and this is a whole other story, have been more in terms of causing war than eliminating war. For example, when Nasser withdrew the UN peacekeeping forces, that caused the beginning of a war. The UN is not a neutral party. It's problematic. And I'm someone who really believes in the idea of having United Nations. And I would say that the problem is that the world we have today, and in the article I wrote, and you've surely read Chancellor Scholz's article in Foreign Affairs about the Zeitenwende, the world is in a tectonic shift. The world is in a shift. We see it all across the world, right? The UN has not been stepping up to the world as it exists today. It lives in an illusion of a world that it creates, a world where it fixates on issues and doesn't solve anything. So Stefanik, to make a long answer to your question, I believe, and many Americans believe, is a good antidote to that, and she's going to shake it up. Now, Huckabee is also very, very favorable in the terms of the evangelicals, who are great supporters of President Trump's campaign. And Rubio is an excellent choice. Now, it is true that senators and congressmen are not implementers of foreign policy, but they are keenly knowledgeable on foreign policy. And Rubio, I mean, again, the Secretary of State is the top of the organization, setting a tone for the organization. Look, I mean, again, not to be highly critical, but Secretary Blinken has been an ineffective Secretary of State. He has not, it's kind of, if you listen to the message is weak. And this is indicative of the fact that, if you recall, that Jake Sullivan wrote an article in Foreign Affairs magazine, and in there he said, our foreign policy is so good that the Middle East is totally quiet.
Yes.
Then came October 7th,
Yeah.
and then he had to send in another version of the article to talk about what happened. I mean, this is not sophisticated foreign policy making, I don't think. And it was a weakness in the administration that Blinken, as the face of the administration, saying what he says, even up to the top of the administration, which is Biden, when he says, my message is don't. My message is don't. And then they went ahead and they did it. Why would Putin invade Ukraine? He must have felt emboldened when Biden had withdrawn American troops so precipitously from Afghanistan in a shocking event, which also helped Harris and Biden to lose that election with the death of 13 of our soldiers.
Yeah.
That's something that Americans, I mean, and I'm sure the Turkish population doesn't tolerate either the death of its soldiers, but death of soldiers is critical to a candidate or to a president's public favorability. And the pulling out of Afghanistan opened up a lot of it. It caused China to become more aggressive on Taiwan. I mean, to create maneuvers around Taiwan, organized maneuvers, the Russians invading Ukraine. These are tectonic shifts, as Scholz speaks. Now, so Rubio, I think, he's a strong candidate, but the point is, to me, Ozan Bey, what's the message that the Secretary of State is giving out to the world? It's not, the Secretary of State does not micromanage every little thing. He has diplomats to do that, just like the Turkish Foreign Service has excellent diplomats. They're all around the world. He puts a message out, and that's the policy. The problem is that Blinken's message was either muddy or weak. And when you have that, then the rest of the foreign policy follows suit. Now, about the other candidates for nomination that you mentioned, Pete Hegseth for the Secretary of Defense, a fascinating choice. Look, it happens that maybe they don't vet the candidates properly, they don't look into it. But again, on the surface, Hegseth is a Brown Star. He's a soldier. He won the Brown Star. And Trump saw him on Fox News and Fox Sunday. So, look, it's an approach. And I think the approach, it's very clear that what you can see from Trump's approach, shaking up. Stefanik at the UN, Hegseth at Defense, Kash Patel at the FBI, Tulsi Gabbard. All of this is, I'm not going to just do the same exact thing that everybody did before. I'm going to do shaking up. I'm going to send in Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, and they're going to shake everything up. They're going to cut government. Now, the question is, how much can they cut? I think it's hard to know. We have civil service and so forth. But again, the idea that you want to do that sends a message that you want to shake up the system. Our system needs shaking a bit, a lot. But again, I would say, the resilience of the American system and the constitutional system, I think, is a great source of pride to Americans because, for example, Trump has said he wants to appoint his nominees in a recess appointment. And to make that sort of simple is that when Senate is not in session, he can appoint, but he can only appoint for the session itself, then the Senate must approve. And he doesn't want his candidates, now they are going to vet them, because what you see is the Senate, even if it's going to be controlled by Republicans, form a check and a balance against the president. And that is something that the president has got to work with the Senate, even with the Republicans, who are saying, we are not going to give you a carte blanche, a blank check on your nominees. We're going to vet them and see what happens. So again, Trump is a different, let us say, a different flavor of politics. We saw in the first administration a taste of that. And by the way, when he comes into office, the first thing he's going to do are executive orders. He's going to eliminate all of Biden's. He's going to, clearly emphasize fracking, emphasize energy production in the United States. He's going to deal with migration, which will be extremely controversial and difficult.
Yes.
He's going to deal with all of the conflicts in the world. He's going to step in, and he's already stepping in already. So the nominees, I think, are indicative of his message, and some of them are absolutely, I would say, perfect, but some are, let us say, controversial in terms of politics. But remember, bottom line, the Senate generally does support the president in terms of their nominees. I mean, that's something the Senate wants to, especially the House and the Senate are controlled by the Republicans. So they don't want to frustrate completely what Trump is doing. But remember, our House of Representatives is up in 2 years. Our Senate, 1/3 of our Senate is up in 2 years.
Yes.
So the congressmen are also worried that if the Trump administration comes in and the cart starts to get unwieldy, they could lose seats. And that's what they're worried about. They're worried about Trump being successful so that it will help them and their message as well. It's not just that they're doing it also for the good of the Republic.
Okay, thank you, Mark. You sound very optimistic, and same optimism, in fact, exists in Turkey in terms of especially political elite and media, elements. So people really are optimistic about second Trump presidency. I don't know why, but there is sympathy for him. So maybe then we can pass to our common research interest topic, Turkish-American relations from here. So what we should expect from the second Trump presidency, there will be issues. Of course, Syria is a mess now. There's trouble in Gaza, ongoing conflict in Gaza. Two countries take different sides in some issues. But on the other hand, both sides seem to fix relations and to make a move forward. So as an expert who wrote an excellent chapter on Turkish-American relations recently, so what could you say about the upcoming days?
I think I would emphasize two approaches that maybe would be appropriate in terms of going into new. First of all, perceptions, fixing perceptions, improving perceptions of Turkey, very important. And secondly, in connection with that is to repair some of the disconnects, of which I had the privilege of writing the article for you, and thank you very much for that tremendous honor. There are many disconnects in our relations, and we need to fix them. And part of that also, and that relates, of course, to, and I talked about the perception in America. If you ask the congressmen and senators about their perceptions of Turkey, that is extremely important. It's not enough to have good relations with the president. And I think that Trump's approach, and we saw it in the first administration, was really very working relationship with Turkey, having President Erdogan come, sitting in a meeting in the Oval Office with the senators, trying to iron out issues, figuring out things. And really, with the CAATSA sanctions, those sanctions were imposed, if I understand correctly, because the National Defense Appropriation Act forced the president to put sanctions, but then Trump put I'm going to call them mild. I'm sure they were punitive, but of the menu of sanctions, I believe that was selected, the presidency of the Defense Protectorate, or whatever it's called in Turkish, I just don't know that was kind of hitting very hard on a scale of 1 to 10. So I think Trump implemented that. Of course, we know that what occurred with the F-35s, and that is very significant in the S-400. And, I mean, the perception, and I hear it from friends, acquaintances, and this is, the main perception in question is Turkey is a NATO ally, right? Is Turkey a NATO ally? Well, yes, it certainly is. It's an active NATO ally. And historically, it's been very important NATO ally, sitting where it sits in the geography. I know that the Turkish diplomat friend of mine used to say, Mark, Turkey, we live in a tough neighborhood in Turkey. It's the toughest neighborhood. You see it all the time. Iran, Russia, Syria. Look what goes on in Syria. You have potentials for regional and world conflagrations right there and then in the region. So it's essential to have a strong NATO ally. But if you're going to Trump, and this was kind of the approach where President Erdogan would meet with Obama and with Trump and Biden, by the way. I don't know if did he ever have a meeting? I'm not even sure. I don't know
Not
that
when
he
he
ever
was
had.
president, but he
But
was
I'm saying
when
when he
he was
was
vice
he's
president.
the only one. He never had an Oval. I don't think he met with President Erdogan on the sidelines of meetings,
Yeah.
but in the Oval Office, like Trump did or Obama and so forth, they didn't do that. And years went by, and I think President Erdogan wanted an invitation to the Oval Office and didn't get it from Biden. I mean, that was an awfully big blunder on that part. And again, look, it's the Congress. The diplomats here and Turkish diplomats always had distinguished, look, the presidency, the presidential interaction, but the Congress. We need to have better relations with Congress because Congress approves appropriations. It approves F-16s. It approves all of these things that Turkey needs for its defense and so forth. So I think that fixing those perceptions is very, very important. And repairing the disconnects, which you talked about, the multitasking, is a very confusing thing for American policymakers who are wondering why would a NATO ally, want to be in the BRICS? Why do they want to be with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization when China is predicted to be America's greatest adversary? And why would you have this relationship with Russia. Now that's another one that's, again, confusing because it's not that America's allies have to sit on one side of the street, but this is a street that it's hard street to figure out. Turkey supports Ukraine. It doesn't support sanctions against Russia. Yet at the same time, it's a pivotal power in the Bosporus, in the region, in terms of preventing escalation of Russian warships in the region, Montreux. So all of these things put together in the soup, in the chorba, you mix it up in the soup, and you have, for American congressmen and senators, they're not great political scholars like yourself. They want to get reelected. The constituents come to them and they say, I don't like what I see. I don't like this. I don't like that. And they take that into account. And that's how it works. It's not malevolent. I think that, sometimes when, scholars in Turkey talk about the lobbies and all that, the lobbies are not malevolent. It's our system. Our system is interest groups. Interest groups function in Congress. Congressmen have to be up in the House every 2 years for reelection. This is very difficult to be reelected every 2 years. They have to be very cognizant of their constituents. So I think that because of that, more attention needs to be to calm down and to fix the public relations in terms of the Turkish perception in the American Congress and among the American population. Look, I mean, I would say, and I'm no marketing genius, but when you open the paper, you see Turkish Airlines, you see the ads for Turkish Airlines, and I never met anybody who didn't like going on Turkish Airlines. Everybody likes going on Turkish Airlines. They're wonderful. I mean, I remember I had something and I asked, and they were so helpful to me. I mean, wonderful, So that, and going to Turkey, I never heard anybody who went there didn't have a good time. Everybody likes it. But when we move from the tourism to the politics, that's when we start getting a bumpy road. Now, one other example is also optics. On the Sweden and Finland accession to the NATO. I mean, Americans, they're very like plane. It's like Truman was a plane speaker. Americans, what they're doing, they can figure stuff out. They figured out Harris. They can figure this out. If President Biden says, I would like Sweden and Finland in NATO, and again, I understand the reasoning, and there were good reasons and things. And then Turkey kind of stonewalled it and stonewalled it and stonewalled it. Now, don't you think, I didn't ask anybody, I didn't discuss it with anybody, but don't you think if you're in Congress and you're trying to figure out how to get the Ukraine war over, and you need Sweden and Finland not to be in a battle with Russia, but the idea that they join NATO is another bargaining chip to bring Russia, hopefully, to make an agreement. And Turkey is stonewalling. I mean, I don't agree. They have to do this. And there's an agreement, the tripartite agreement. And then there's more issues. And finally, Turkey approves. Optics. Optics are very key. Yes, I understand that the approach is to make these decisions that are beneficial from the point of view of Turkish foreign policy. And obviously, the issues for Turkey, Sweden, and Finland were very, very significant. But at the same time, there has to be a sensitivity to if improved relations would be the goal. Hopefully it is. I hope, inshallah, that's the goal. If that's the goal, then these disconnects need to be addressed and the perceptions improved. And, and without belaboring the Middle East, that rhetoric on the Middle East and so forth is just out there and people see it. An average, I mean, there's no average person, but highly educated, but people here read the paper, read the New York Times, and the New York Times does not always portray, they certainly don't portray Israel favorably, but they certainly don't portray always Turkey very favorably. And what they talk about, people read it. And you know what, Ozan Bey, people are going about their business and they're not focusing on the little details like we do and worrying about the dynamics of policy. They should want to know, helpful, not helpful. Yararlı, that's one of my favorite words. I taught a course at E2 for Turkish professors as a fellowship. It was more about, fine-tuning, kind of like English conversation. It was more like, small talk, something I'm always praying that I could ever do in Turkish, and I'm not ready yet, just to be able to have a conversation. So I had 25 professors, and at the end of the semester, I asked one of my distinguished professors from E2, how was the course? Çok yararlı. A big compliment. It's a big compliment. So yes. I say, make decisions and make policies that are going to be yararlı. They're helpful and useful to improving the relationship. Now, I do understand that all politics is local. Tip O'Neill, who was our Speaker of the House, I think he was Turkish. No, I'm just kidding. But I always say that Tip O'Neill, a famous Turkish diplomat, or politician, he said all politics is local. And that's true in America, and it's true in Turkey. Because clearly, the dynamics internally, how, again, I wrote an article on how I thought President Erdogan won the election. I didn't think that was in doubt whatsoever. It was very clear to me. But, you can't look at always the factors of it's kind of like, it's the economy. No, it's not. It was the idea that I think, and this is also for Trump, how do you resonate with the people? Is what you're doing acceptable to the people? Except in the case of Turkey, I think that it was also, and that's also part of the conundrum here, the enigma. You want to make Turkey a key player in the world, but at the same time, you want to keep your allies like the United States happy. And if you want to keep them happy, they want something done right away. And then for the public opinion in Turkey is a different mix. So that's very complicated. But I would say overall, the rhetoric is people get it. They don't know much about it, but they see the words and the expressions and the actions, and I mean, I don't want to harp on it, but the fact is, if a head of state, President Herzog, people see this in the paper, is on his way in a plane and wants to cross over Turkish airspace, which was a no-brainer, and obviously all those years, and then he's told he can't, so he can't cross over the airspace to go to Azerbaijan to the COP29. People read that in the paper and they say, they scratch their heads and they don't understand. It's a head of state with the same courtesy and the same courtesy be space. So that's optics. It's optics, unnecessary optics that people in America see, read in the paper. They're not focusing on the ins and outs like you're doing and other scholars. They're not focusing on that, but just reading them. They're saying, understand that. Why would they do that? That's something that, why do it? Just let it be, let it go, And again, and we certainly need to restore good relations between Israel and Turkey, and that will be good in terms of all of these relations being improved. We need to do that and work hard to do that, and hopefully that we hope the Gaza war will end and all these things will be a distant and horrific nightmare in our past, will be gone. We'll be able to do that, but we really have to, I think, tone that down. And I think it's all part of what I said was perceptions and disconnects. And the way that we fix that is we have a more a calmer kind of approach in terms of the relationship, and that will improve on all levels. That'll improve the relationship with Europe, with America, all around. I mean, that's what I think.
Okay, thank you, Mark. I think I agree with you, and I think we have much more in common between Turkey and United States compared to our disagreements. So if we have a working diplomacy going on between leaders and foreign services, plus as we did some academic initiatives to improve relations, like our book, so probably there'll be a better days coming soon. So thanks for being with us today, and hopefully see you in the near future for a conference or another event. Thank you, Mark.
I look forward to it, and thank you very much for the privilege of doing this with you.
Bye. Thank you.